So in the previous lesson, we spent some time understanding the messages our brand needs to communicate and then organizing those messages in order of importance. Now we have to decide what to communicate in the logo itself. Now this is important because we simply can't cram our entire brand strategy into the logo. It would be too much information. It's far better to communicate just a few key messages clearly than attempt to communicate many messages poorly. Let's begin with a quick exercise to show you how this works in practice. So I'm going to show you 3 different very famous logos, and for each one, when I display it on the screen, I want you to pause the video and just write down the clear messages that you feel it communicates, the really obvious ones. So when you're ready, let's begin with the first brand. So what does that logo communicate? Well, hopefully to most of us, burgers. And what kind of burgers? Well, big burgers. Everything about that logo, the font, the shapes are big and almost juicy. So that's what it communicates to us. Let's take a look at the next logo. Again, very famous, very successful. What does this communicate to you? Well, perhaps 2 very clear messages. We have the A pointing to the Z with a little arrow. So A to Z, the full alphabet, everything. You can get everything at Amazon.com. The other message, well, that arrow actually forms a smile. So if you shop at Amazon, you're going to be happy. Happy, smiling customers. Let's take a look at our last brand. And the messaging here might be a little less obvious, but see what you come up with. So the Nike logo, that famous Nike swoosh, what does this bring to our minds? Well, it's more abstract, so this is a little less obvious, but a sense of speed and movement, of activity. And even the tick that the swoosh forms, well, that's a successful, positive symbol, isn't it? So that last example may have been less literal, but all 3 of those brands use very simple, clear messages. So why do brands use this approach? Well, let's use an analogy. I'd like you to imagine you're lost and you're looking for directions. So you decide to approach a group of 6 strangers. Now, which would you prefer? That just one of the strangers replies and gives you clear, obvious directions that you can follow to your destination, or that all 6 strangers try to reply to you at the same time, shouting over each other and perhaps giving you slightly different messages? Well, I'm sure if all 6 answered at once, you'd feel confused and likely overwhelmed. So what's the point? Well, we don't want our logo to feel like a group of people shouting different messages at us. It's better for the logo to communicate just 1 or 2 messages clearly than attempt and fail to communicate many messages. Now, just a note at this stage that before we actually begin looking at visual elements and design, we're going to keep it based on the theory. We're going to look at words and meanings. Then in the next lesson, we'll look at how we can communicate these different things visually. So if you've completed the previous lesson in your workbook, you'll see that we've already done a fair amount of the work here, and you'll have a clear hierarchy of your brand messages in place. Now, yours will be different, but in my example, with my client being that high-end local cafe, here are the brand messages that we arrived at. So how do we decide which of the messages we should try to communicate in our logo, particularly as we're looking to feature just 1 or 2 of them? Well, essentially, the higher up this hierarchy we've created, the better. The messages toward the top are more fundamental and more important to the brand. To help you with this, I'll first walk you through my thought process as I went about this for my example. So for my example, the Totteridge Bakehouse, the primary message is for this to be known as the destination, the high-end cafe in the area. So the logo can definitely fit that bill, can look very classy and high-end. I also think the key message, trendy, is something the logo could convey particularly well. So in the best communicated via column, I'm going to write logo for both of those messages. Now this doesn't mean some of the other messages might not come across in the logo as a bonus, but I'm not going to worry if they don't come across clearly and strongly. Why not? Well, although it's beyond the scope of this course, there are other elements of the brand identity system that we can use to convey these remaining messages. And some may actually be more appropriate or do a better job. So if you pause this next slide, you can actually see an example of the elements I might choose to cover these remaining messages, whether it be colors, fonts, or imagery. By using the brand identity system as a whole, you're then allowing each element to play to its strengths. So for example, if we take the brand message charitable for the cafe I'm branding, we wouldn't panic if that's not something we can communicate clearly within the logo itself. In fact, it might clash with the luxurious, high-end look and feel we're trying to give the brand as a priority. Instead, a brand might decide it's better to communicate that value via video or images of a charity it contributes to in action. It might decide to share those on social media, or it could appear on the company's webpage or blog. So please work through this page in your copy of the workbook, and don't worry about assigning something to every single brand message at the moment. Try to identify just 1 to a maximum of 3 messages that you want to attempt to communicate in the logo design. Type logo in the column alongside that message to indicate that's your choice, and then save the document. So in our next lesson, we're going to focus on how to communicate these various values visually. Now, this is often something specific to the target audience, their culture, their background, the environment they live in, the things they're used to seeing, and the brand decisions they're used to making. So that might sound scary, but it's actually quite easy to start putting a knowledge of that in place in your work and your decisions. I'll show you just how we can do this over the next few lessons.